Welcome to a new Daily Top Askreddit video. Today's topic.
What's a time where all they had to do was ask, instead became a bigger deal than it should have? In law school, we did a big mock settlement negotiation. Each person had a goal they wanted and a minimum they would compromise for. I was playing the victim who was going to get a settlement payout. I wanted money, but my assigned minimum was that I was not going to walk away without an apology. That was all I really wanted. The negotiations spiraled and dragged on into a standstill because despite it costing them nothing, nobody on the other side was willing to give an apology. Everyone was too worried that an apology might look like admitting fault or giving ground. In reality, it would have given them everything they wanted. It was probably one of the most important lessons I learned in law school. Don't get so hung up on the argument and details that you forget that the people you are dealing with are people, usually people who are stressed out and hurting. I took a human rights case to tribunal hearing over an apology. I was fired after formally asking HR to come up with a solution for a manager who wouldn't let me do my assigned job because he didn't think electrical programming should be done by a woman. He regularly had me sweep floors, and literally anything other than the job I was hired for. I had asked HR to do something about this for months, but when I finally submitted it in writing I was told that he had been there too long, and despite this being an issue that predated me, it was easier to fire me than reprimand him. So I filed with our provincial human rights tribunal on the grounds of discrimination and reprisal. All I wanted was an apology and for them to admit they were wrong to fire me. They refused. It went to mediation, and I refused to settle for the amount they offered because they still wouldn't apologize. I would have taken the apology and $0, but instead it went to tribunal and I was awarded more money than they offered during mediation. Edit: I never did get the apology, but the ruling in my favor satisfied my need for moral justice. This is actually so common. Where I live they changed the liability laws ages back to say that apologies don't mean anything legally. People wouldn't apologize because they thought it would cost them if they went to court, but a very large number of people honestly just wanted an apology and wouldn't have gone to court in the first place had they gotten one. This was McDonald's major blunder with the hot coffee lady, I recall. Bare minimum cost of medical care and say sorry, and they tantrumed their way into that judgment. Then again, a lot of people do still think that poor lady was an unreasonable bitch who screwed McDonald's over nothing, so it didn't completely fail them. Was crashing with a friend for a month. He has a big house, he's basically family, I'm his kid's godparent, I live 8,000 miles away in another country, so yeah. Wasn't being that guy, just a guy trying to spend time with my guy and his family. 2 weeks in he's being really fucking weird, and it turns out he had all these expectations that he never communicated. Namely bringing the trash out for them and walking with him and his daughter to and from pre-K in the mornings and afternoons. I cooked for them, I read to her, etc. I wasn't a slouch of a guest. I was like, dude, all you had to do is ask. Turns out he'd been stewing on this for weeks. We laughed about it, but it was a pretty sealed convo. What does sealed convo mean? It killed Bin Laden. He had all these expectations that he never communicated. Namely bringing the trash out for them and walking with him and his daughter to and from pre-K in the mornings and afternoons. I cooked for them, I read to her, etc. I wasn't a slouch of a guest. Years ago I spent a couple of days over my father's house with his live-in girlfriend. My stayover was more business than personal. After my visit concluded and my father was driving me to my sister's place in another town, where I was to spend another couple of days, while driving my father told me that his girlfriend thought I was a bad guest. I asked him why she thought that. He said it was because after having dinner my first night there, I didn't do her dishes. This is one of the reasons why I don't like going over other people's houses. Not for a few days or even for just a couple hours. I inevitably wind up accidentally breaking some unknown, unspoken rule of the house and making my hosts unhappy. Truthfully, it didn't occur to me to do the dishes or offer to do so. The second after finishing dinner, immediately, before I could say or do anything, my father started gathering our plates and utensils from the table and putting them in the dishwasher. Sitting there after dinner, never having been to my father's house before, I really didn't know what I should or shouldn't do next. Had she or my father spoken up and asked me to do the dishes, I would have done so. The thing is that my father and his girlfriend hate doing housework. So, they hire a housekeeper to come over a few times a week to clean the house for them. But she expects her guests to do housework for her as well. As someone from a Middle Eastern culture, this is mind-boggling to me. As a host you never let your guest lift a finger, as a guest you insist on helping with everything. Then you battle to the death to see who wins. Why didn't your father just ask you, tell you to do it? That's normally how parent-child relationships work. It's not like some random stranger, it's your father. But she expects her guests to do housework for her as well. No, she doesn't. IMHO, she hates people, or just you, visiting for any number of reasons and was looking for a convenient reason to be upset with you. If it wasn't the dishes, it would have been how you folded the towels as you put them back on the rack, or not having slippers and walking around in your socks. That's a major reason why people like that purposely don't mention anything. It makes it easier to get and stay mad over it. Phew, when I graduated high school, I received a scholarship to study abroad in Germany for 1 year and live with a host family. After the honeymoon phase passed, my host mom was on the phone every week with the organization that sponsored me, complaining about things I did that she didn't like. For example, throwing away school papers in the small receptacle in my bedroom. I never put food trash or anything other than recyclable paper in the bin, which, for the record, was already there when I moved in. The family said I could use their house phone whenever I wanted to call my fellow American friend who was on the same scholarship. Apparently I was abusing this privilege. These are just a few examples. It was definitely not a language barrier issue since she spoke fluent English. The sponsor threatened to send me home, so I called them and explained to them that she wasn't communicating her issues to me directly. I was none the wiser that I was doing anything wrong until my sponsor would tell me so. Thankfully they finally listened and told host mom to start talking to me about her issues directly and that they weren't going to take any more phone calls from her. Did that work? Yes and no. She was upset that they told her to stop calling, but I got to finish out my year abroad without any further threats of being sent home, just in a largely awkward, tense environment. It's been 12+ years, so I'm able to look back and laugh at this point, but I remember the last thing she said to me when they dropped me off at the airport was, "Don't forget, full-bodied women don't wear children's sizes." So it took a year, but she did finally find her voice, lol. My mother-in-law being really passive-aggressive about not getting to spend time with her grandbabies. Trisha's got an autoimmune disease, but is still able to keep a really busy schedule in her 60s all over town. She'll passively say to my father-in-law or sister-in-law that she's mad she doesn't get more time with her grandkids. She could just talk to us directly and we could work something out, but hearing it through a grapevine is super annoying. Also, it's 100% her schedule, but she doesn't realize that her schedule doesn't really allow for a lot of grandkids' time. She's usually got meetings or volunteering through most of the day and is upset the babies are asleep by 7:30. Before I went no contact with my mother, she'd always grandiosely ask, "When am I gonna get to see my grandbabies?" I would always respond, "When are you free?" Then the hemming and hawing would always commence and she'd say, "Well, I've got to work and I've got my hair appointment, so let me check my schedule and I'll get back with you." And she never would. This is my father in regards to his grandson, my son. He openly cried earlier this year about how he hates that we're not close. He's in the Northeast, we moved down south years ago, but anytime I try to set up a FaceTime or even a phone call, I'm met with, "I'm busy, work's just crazy, I'll call you later." Quote, "It's really annoying and we're over at her place quite a bit, but when she is home she's usually in her home office working on her projects. There's no way for her to be with a baby and do her work at the same time. Exhausting, man." A coworker borrowed a charger from someone's desk without asking. The owner got upset and reported it to HR, even though they would have happily lent it if asked. We were in one of those open environment offices, so you can basically see every desk from any other desk. One evening, the IT guy had some issues and his desk is like 5 away from mine. So I'm over there helping him and it's now like 7 p.m. and the janitor has arrived to clean up. He gets to my desk, then he opens up a bag of cookies that my then girlfriend had made for me, then he takes one and starts eating it at my desk. WTF. He figured that it was late and nobody was at the desk, except that I was a few desks away, so of course I'm aware when he gets to my desk. I couldn't believe it. I confronted him and he's like, hey, those were good cookies." I let it go, but wondered what other stuff he just helps himself to. We provided free soda to employees, so we had a vending machine that didn't require money. As an employee, more or less, he was outsourced office janitor, he's entitled to one, I guess. But another late night he's there and I hear, "CA chunk, CA chunk, CA chunk," and I look up and he's pressing the button to dispense cans of soda, but he keeps taking them, then putting them into his cart. He must have taken 20 cans. He did this multiple times over multiple nights. Basically every day. I mentioned this to a coworker, they set up a webcam and we tooled the recording of him doing this to HR. The next week we had a different janitor. A year later, I was working at another startup, in a new office. It's late, I'm working, the janitors come in and there he is. Note, he was not fired, he was just swapped with another janitor at another office as they were an outsourced cleaning service. I just made sure not to have anything valuable at my desk and left it at that. I let it go, but wondered what other stuff he just helps himself to. I watched somebody almost get fired for browsing porn at work. Eventually they looked at the times and realized it was long after he went home. Turns out it was the janitors. They didn't even consider firing the janitors, they just changed it to require a password to log in. Taking without asking is stealing. I completely understand the standpoint of the guy whose charger got taken. If you can't be bothered to even ask, what else are you going to borrow without me knowing about it? I'm a professor. The end of course paper is worth a significant part of the grade. It's a case study with a kind of prescriptive format. While I think I've been clear about my expectations, I'm definitely looking for the information to be organized and presented in a specific way. Through the past few months, we've had a few 0-point deliverables for them to submit outlines and working drafts for comment. About half the class hasn't turned in anything. No big deal, it's not for a grade. It's literally just an opportunity to get some feedback. Up until the week that the papers are due, I'm so eager to provide feedback, I very much feel like I'm willing to help them as much as I can up until it's due. All they need to do is ask. Now that the course is about to close, I'm getting the sense that a few students are starting to panic. The papers are due next week and I've had a few students reach out asking for me to read their 10+ page drafts and ask for extensions. I'm for sure not taking time away from my family over the Thanksgiving holiday because you haven't planned ahead. I genuinely don't think I could have made myself any more available over the lead up to the due date. It's due when it's due. If a student didn't take advantage of the past month and they turn in a lemon of a final product, tough shit. Yeah, definitely a tough life lesson. A lot of people, especially younger people, have to get burned by procrastinating multiple times over the course of their life in order to completely change their habits. I 100% would have been one of those kids who waited until the last second. Edit, I also see you're the mod of a sub based around preparing for disaster ahead of time lol. Very fitting for this post.